is the system that is going to be controlling all of the other systems in the body. Those systems are going to be communicating back and forth with the nervous system, so that the nervous system can tell them what to do. So we have a couple of different input and outputs. So the sensory input is going to be taking some sort of stimuli and is going to be taking that stimuli to the brain or the spinal cord, what we call the central nervous system, to integrate and interpret what is going on in the body. Then the brain, once it interprets, or the spinal cord, once it interprets, it's going to then send a message in the motor output, and it's going to respond to the stimuli. And if you guys can remember from a long time ago, we talked about this, and when we respond to stimuli, we're going to always be communicating with an effector, and an effector is a gland or a muscle. So you can see in this system that this gentleman would like to pick up this glass of water, and so the sensory input goes to the integration center, which is your brain or spinal cord. In this case, it's the brain. And it's going to interpret what the body wants, or what that stimuli is saying. And then finally, it's going to communicate via the motor output to a muscle, in this case, not a gland, but a muscle, so that he can pick up the water glass. There are two main divisions of the nervous system: the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which are all the other spinal and cranial nerves, and then all of those nerves that branch off from there. So the peripheral nervous system is going to be taking messages to the central nervous system and away from the central nervous system. Then within the peripheral nervous system, there are two main divisions. The first is sensory, or afferent division, and that is going to be the one that's going to be taking the sensory, the stimuli, whatever that stimuli is, it's going to be taking that message to the central nervous system. We also have something called visceral afferent fibers, and that is going to be just another part of that that is going to be specific to taking the stimuli from organs to the brain. And then we have the motor or efferent division. And so that's going to be transmitting the messages from the central nervous system to the effector. Then within the motor division, we have two main parts. One part is going to be voluntary or consciously controlled, and the other one is going to be involuntarily controlled. So you know that when we're talking about the motor division, that is when we're bringing the message from the brain or spinal cord to an effector, we have different kinds of muscles. So the somatic nervous system is going to be controlling the skeletal muscles, because skeletal muscles are voluntary muscles. Then we have another part, autonomic nervous system, and that's going to regulate your involuntary muscles and your glands. So these are the ones that you don't have to consciously control. Now, when we're talking about nervous tissue is made up of cells. And so there are two main types of cells. There's a neuron, and neurons are the ones that are communicating with one another, sending messages back and forth, and making sure everything is running correctly. And then we have these things called supporting cells, or neuroglial, or just glial cells, that are going to be supporting the neurons and what they need to do for the body. So these neuroglial or glial cells do a lot of different things for the body, or for the neurons, because neurons are really busy. They're sending messages back and forth. They have to be very quick. They have to, they can't be interrupted. And so what the neuroglial cells are doing is just supporting them. They're providing scaffolding for the neurons. They're insulating the neurons. They're making sure that the neurons are connecting with other neurons to communicate, and they promote health. The most abundant type of neuroglial cell, and the only one we will talk about today, is called an astrocyte. And astrocytes are basically they're glial cells or supporting cells that are going to make sure that the neuron has a nutrient supply. So it's going to cover the capillaries and it's going to connect the capillaries with with the actual neuron itself, because neurons are cells, and cells need nutrients, they need oxygen, they need to get rid of waste products, so do neurons. So it's just going to help the neurons do this. So they're going to support and brace, anchor neurons to their nutrient supplies, make sure that neurons are communicating with the neurons that they're supposed to be communicating with, and they control the chemical environment. So this is what an astrocyte looks like. This portion is the astrocyte. This yellow thing is the neuron. And you can see that these are capillaries. So what it's doing is it's holding on to the capillary and it's holding on to the neuron. And so it's making sure that the capillary is close enough to the neuron so we can have diffusion of gases and nutrients and waste for that the health of that neuron.